I have good news for you. You all get to sing that song with us at the end of the service. I love that song and was so grateful that these beautiful youth were so willing to sing it with me. I have been thinking about this song so much the past few weeks, and I love it. And I think I love it because it reminds me of how broken I am and how broken each one of us are. That left to our own devices, we are broken and shattered, we are rough around the edges, we are misshapen, we are rusty, and we are incomplete. Just like you may have noticed these pieces up on the table here. And yet, God uses me, God uses us to be the keeper of the greatest treasure. The girls read two beautiful scriptures this morning. One that reminds us that we are clay jars carrying this treasure of life and love, and that no matter what life throws at us, we remain carriers of this treasure. Another passage that reminds us that this treasure we carry, Christ living inside of us, is our peace. That without Christ we remain separated from one another by these giant walls of hostility. There's this notion going around, this crazy idea that being human is about being perfect. And somehow that notion got wrapped up with Christianity. That being a Christian means we need to be perfect. It is destructive to the human spirit and destructive to the human community to believe that we have to be something that we are not. To be a particular way and to think particular things in order to be loved by God and accepted by one another. No matter how many gifts and abilities we have, our knowledge and our insight are limited. Limited to our time and our place in history. We are all, every one of us, subject to selfish impulses, riddled with personal quirks, easily misled by delusions of our own egos, as well as by the opinion of others. Some of us think erroneously that we are less worthy than we actually are. And others of us are convinced that we are top-notch, the best of the best. In reality, there is something good about the worst of us, and there is something wrong with all of us. There is not a single living human being who is in such great shape that he or she does not need the grace of Christ to make him or her whole. A fellow minister recalls walking around New York City and stumbling upon a church in need of repairs and under construction. There was scaffolding along the side of the church, and on the front door was yellow caution tape that said, "Danger, enter at your own risk." Of course, those words were designed to protect those who pass by from construction accidents. But I bet all of us here can think of someone, a minister or a fellow churchgoer, who could testify to the truth of that sign. So many have been hurt by churches and by Christians, but also for those of us who come and stay, get hurt, and come back, it's risky and it's dangerous. Because in order to appreciate and revel in the experience of God's grace and mercy, we must fully recognize our own brokenness. And usually that's not very fun. Brené Brown posted a photo on her Instagram this week with these words. For those who fought for our right to vote and gave their lives for this democracy, our gratitude is showing up to vote. And regardless of how this election turns out, I will go to church Sunday so I can pass the peace, break bread, and sing along with friends and strangers who hold completely different beliefs than I do. Just as a reminder that we are all connected by something much holier than politics. Love. Peace be with you. If you came to church this morning to be surrounded by people who thought the same as you, you're at the wrong church. For there aren't two people in this room who think the same on any two topics. And that's what makes church challenging, and that's what makes church beautiful. I imagine our church reflects the rest of the country, where a large percentage of us voted one way, a large percentage of us voted another way, and a small but mighty percentage voted this third way. And that's okay. That needs to be okay. But here's the thing. We have work to do. No matter who you voted for, I hope we can agree that there is work to be done. As Christians, as Americans, as human beings. Phil and I voted this week. It was Phil's first vote as a new-ish citizen. Yay! I was excited. I was excited to do this with him, and I was excited because I remembered at the previous election there were Girl Scouts selling cookies, and so I thought, this is it. We are going to have this beautiful American morning of voting for our president and buying a bunch of cookies. And we did. And if you haven't tried the new s'more Girl Scout cookies, you need to. I'm sorry I can't bring you a sample because we ate them all. But we voted, and then, just like many of you, we stood in a very, 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 very long line. And Phil and I ended up standing behind this older gentleman, and we started a conversation, and it became very quickly apparent that we differed on most everything. As soon as the conversation started, I pretty much stopped talking, but Phil and this gentleman went back and forth, taking turns, very politely saying, I think we disagree on that, and then they'd keep talking, and the other one would say, I think we disagree on that, and it was all going fine. And then the gentleman turned to Phil and said, no offense, but, and then very pointedly, deeply offended us. And it just got me thinking, we all do that. Why do we make excuses for things that we say when we know they are going to offend people? And I keep thinking about this story because I know I'm guilty of it. Brushing it aside, making a joke, or thinking we're doing this because we're speaking out of love and this person needs to hear this so that they start living the correct way. But are our words in those instances building up the walls of hostility, or are they tearing them down? Are the words we speak that knowingly offend a group of people or a single person spreading peace or spreading conflict? I read some alarming stats this week that stated that about 50% of voters, 50% of Democrats, 50% of Republicans were afraid for their rights, their freedoms, some even their lives if the opposite party won. And this was the case with no matter who won. That is too many people living in fear right now. In a country that prides itself for being free and diverse and powerful, on a weekend where we thank those who have sacrificed so much for this country, we have people living in fear. We have people afraid that their freedoms will be taken away, that their rights no longer exist, that they will get hurt walking down the street, and this is regardless of who won. Many of us are tempted to think that this fear is irrational. I hope this fear is irrational. I pray that it is. Let us make sure that people's fear is irrational. The election season, and during these past couple of years, these large, thick walls of hostility have gone up all over the place. And this isn't just out there, this is in here too. So yes, no matter who you voted for, there is work to be done. Is it peace we extend to one another, or is it hostility? I don't have the stats on this one, but I bet it's a pretty low number of folks who have changed their minds on a topic after repeatedly being offended and insulted. The word for peace is shalom. This was an important word on the lips of Jesus and his followers. The word was commonly used as a greeting and then again as you said goodbye to someone. And while we translate shalom as peace, it is so much more than the absence of conflict. The root of the word is wholeness, completeness, totalness, total happiness, total harmony with self, with God, with nature, with one another. In this Ephesians passage, it's total harmony between these two opposing groups. The hope was for no more walls of hostility, only shalom. I've traveled to India twice, and many of you have heard several stories of my adventures over there. And both times were to visit Lena Lavanya, a beloved missionary that this congregation has supported for many years, and who many of you have had the opportunity to meet. Whenever a team visits Lena, she packs in as much as she can to that week or two that we're visiting her, and she takes us to the most remote, far-off places. Lena would drive us hours out of the city into these villages, and they would know we were approaching by the sound of Lena's car, because it was the only time they would ever hear a motorized vehicle. We were always received with wide eyes and hesitant touches, as many had never seen such a light-skinned person before. On one particular visit, my mom was approached by a small woman and her very tiny baby. The baby was still unnamed, and Lena explained that they had waited to name her until we came. And then my mother was asked to hold the baby, to bless the baby, and to name the baby. And this happened twice on this particular visit. My mother named 2 tiny little Indian baby girls. And my mother knew the reality of the situation, that this tiny baby she held may not even survive. That if the baby did grow up, that she would not become educated by a schooling system that we see so often, but instead would become educated by working in the fields with her siblings and her mother. My mother looked around at the happy, eager faces that surrounded her. Faces that looked so different from her own. Faces of people who thought differently, prayed differently, lived so differently than ourselves. And she thought of this Ephesians passage. She thought about how unnecessarily and how unfortunately thick and tall these walls are between us. Mom named one of those baby girls Olivia. Olivia means peace. The Hindi word for peace is Shanti. The other baby girl was named Shanti. I love this story, and I think about it so often that many of you have probably heard this story before. But those girls should be around 11 or 12 by now. And my prayer is that they grow up hearing this story, that their parents remember that time that peace was shared in such an unexpected way, that they know how much it meant and continues to mean to the people who are present. We're all broken. Our grief has broken us, our pride has broken us, our fear, our anger, our selfishness has broken us. How will we respond to our brokenness? Will we respond by putting up these walls between us and those who are different than us? Will we enter conversations with those who think differently to us with closed fists, ready to defend or offend? Or will we enter with open hands, ready to receive a fresh perspective? Will we respond to our brokenness and others' brokenness with hostility or with peace? Our brokenness allows us the opportunity to be made whole. We are carriers of this special treasure meant to be shared, meant to shine through us. By God's grace, we have one another. And when a lot of broken pieces come together, something beautiful happens. Something beautiful is created. For God makes all things new. In a moment, you will have the opportunity to respond. On the table here at front are many broken pieces. Rough edges, sharp corners, all incomplete. You're going to be invited forward to take a broken piece and place it into the cross beside another broken piece. I know not every one of us feel comfortable coming forward, so know that this will stay in here during Bible study if you feel more comfortable sneaking in when no one else is here. But this is your opportunity to respond. Ron is going to be playing the piano, and the youth will gather up here, and once most of us have come forward, we will return to our seats and sing Broken Vessels together. May we take our brokenness and allow God to make us whole. May we stand beside one another in peace. Shalom. as we stand to sing